Why would he make such a vast universe? Yet save it only for us?
The trailer for Steven Spielberg's new movie just dropped. I'm so excited for this. The movie's called Disclosure Day. It's going to drop June 12, 2026. And there's just so much to unpack in this trailer and the rest of the promotional material. It's been really cool to watch all the reactions and theories about the new teaser and the posters, the billboards. And in the beginning, we just got a bird silhouette, which people speculated could be either a blue jay or a cardinal. And now we know from the trailer that it's indeed a red cardinal. And just an eye inside the silhouette. And now we know what the eye stands for. And not only that, we also have plenty of additional elements. We have a crop circle in the making, mind to matter connection. We have what looked to me like a hybrid girl. I might be wrong about this, but I actually have a whole theory that ties it all together. So here you go. These are my 2 cents about the hidden meanings and Easter eggs in the movie. Let's dive into it. Of course, we cannot talk about birds without mentioning Mike Cleland. Now, in his book, The Messengers, he mostly talks about owls, but I think it's important to mention that owls are, classically a symbol of knowledge and wisdom, and Mike Cleland associates them specifically with the Greys, the little beings often reported around Close Encounters, either as one of their shape-shifting camouflages or as some sort of screen memories in our mind from encountering these beings. And birds in general have always been seen as some sort of messengers between worlds, between the sky and the earth. And when I first saw the eye inside a bird silhouette, it just immediately made me think of shamanic flight as, just a predecessor to remote viewing and to the more recent ideas of psionic assets in the military, which is a concept popularized last year by Jake Barber and his associates in Skywatcher. It's a pretty wild claim, but basically they're saying that with some kind of consciousness-based connection, they can summon, link up, and even pilot UFOs. And so there's a nice tie there with consciousness and birds and shamanic flights and these unknown objects. Also, it's worth mentioning that cardinal is rumored to be a code name that the Air Force uses to refer to UFOs. And of course, the mind goes to the aviary as well, which is, again, rumored to be some kind of secret program in which people like Hal Puthoff were involved. So the choice of the red cardinal was not by chance. Also, in many traditions around the world, we find the concept of the language of the birds, which is some kind of divine tongue. It was called the language of angels. It's called Adamic speech, as in Adam, the first man. And it's said to be used by birds to communicate knowledge to the initiated. In the Kabbalah, for example, or in Renaissance magic, or even in alchemy, the language of the birds was considered a secret language and some kind of key to wisdom, to ultimate wisdom. And sometimes it's also called the langue verte in French, or the green language, which is interesting if you consider the archetypes of the little green alien or the green man as some kind of like wood or natural entity. And in Elizabethan times, English occultist John Dee believed that the magical language of Enoch, which he claimed to have received through some kind of alleged communication with angels that he was having, was actually the language of the birds from older traditions. And this is especially interesting if we consider the very close tie that's been growing in the last few decades between biblical angels and UFOs, as well as birds as, winged beings, but also the evolutionary descendants of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs being a often speculated about potential candidate for the ancestors of what is now the very controversial and highly speculative race of reptilians, or the lizard people, that many people report around the world. So there's just like this interesting snake biting its own tail around birds, angels, dinosaurs, reptilians, and just in general, the demonization of this whole phenomenon throughout the centuries. And I mean, this was my thought as soon as I saw the birds in connection with the eye and UFOs with the first billboard. But now that the trailer has dropped, I kind of feel like there's even more evidence for it, because there's literally an alien language in the trailer, and it sounds amazing. It's made of like clicks and just these raspy vowels or noises. And to me, it just highlights the importance of language and communication with non-human intelligence in general, which is a huge issue in modern SETI initiatives and also just interspecies dialogue in general. And I suspect also, there's just a theory, just a working theory, but I suspect that the alien speech used as a voiceover at the end of the trailer during the title reveal could actually be some kind of Rosetta Stone, which is usually a clue to help people decipher a whole language. I used to do this with Ewan Colfer's Artemis Fall series as a kid. So each book had a script, like some kind of fictional made-up script, different in each book. And it was running through all the pages. And I noticed that the title for each chapter was written both in English and in that script. Once I figured out the letters, or most letters, then I translated the entire message running through all the pages of the book. It was really exciting. It was a cool game. And I think he might be doing something like this. And maybe the Rosetta Stone from the phrase Disclosure Day at the end of the trailer could help us decipher the first message that Emily Blunt's character channels earlier in the trailer. Now, I mentioned that there is, we see a kid in the beginning of the trailer, and at first I thought, the face of the girl kind of looks weird. What if she's an hybrid, actually? And the more I rewatched the trailer, the more I started noticing that the girl kind of looks like Emily Blunt's character. I noticed that the first time that the kid appears, she's wearing a pink dress. And then right after, we see Emily Blunt. She's in this reporting the weather, and she's also wearing pink. So I think that they might be the same person. We're just seeing a flashback of her childhood. I could see that playing out where later in life, she finds out that she's had experiences throughout her entire life, including this communication with non-human intelligence and the animals, and then the house that we see in the end in the forest. And maybe that she was actually either abducted, or she's actually the result of an abduction or some kind of like alien insemination, and she's a hybrid. So that would be really cool. But let's go back to the symbology. We talked about the birds as messengers. And now with the trailer, we also have a deer. And the deer is another strong symbol, an archetype of liminal spaces and the cycle of life and death, perhaps because of the antlers and how they lose the antlers and then they grow them back. So those are two very strong symbols for me. Symbols that, in my opinion, point out to nature and a terrestrial entity or a terrestrial narrative rather than extraterrestrial. So I'm really curious how he plays with that. Okay, so we talked about animals. Now let's talk about the eye. In Norse mythology, stay with me with this one, Odin sacrificed his eye in Mimir's well at the bottom of the Tree of Life, Yggdrasil, in exchange for knowledge. In another legend, unrelated but also somewhat related, he also hung himself from Yggdrasil for the same purpose, in exchange for wisdom and knowledge, which kind of reminds me of the upside down eye in the early billboards, which kind of looked alien, but if you actually turn the picture around, it was just a normal eye. So there's an interesting connection there. I might be reading too much into this, but I just wonder if Spielberg is trying to suggest something about how information comes at a cost, potentially a very high cost, that would affect our ability to see clearly, to tell what's real from what's fake, and perhaps even recognize friend from foe. Also, Odin, or Woden, is the father of the gods, and he's been associated for a long time with UFOs, actually. And he's just one of several sky gods that are identified as a literal eye flying around and watching over the entire world. And he also had two ravens, Hugin and Munin, who are said to report to him using the mystical language of the birds. So there's, again, all these connections between birds, language, and the eye, and UFOs. And just, I can just keep going. The symbolism around birds just runs incredibly deep. Of course, like in modern UFO lore, there's this concept of retrieved and reverse engineered crashed crafts, often interpreted as some kind of technological gift or donation to humanity, meant either to help us or control our evolution. And that immediately brings to mind Prometheus, of course, and the theft of fire, which is, the primal, the quintessential technology. Fun fact, less known but super fascinating detail about the theft of fire is that this myth is actually almost ubiquitous. It's universal across different cultures around the world, and it almost always involved birds, either stealing fire from the gods to give it to us mortals, or the ones being robbed of the fire, of the divine fire. Even in the story of Prometheus, Zeus punishes him by having an eagle eat his liver every day of his life enchained. And Zeus, aka Jupiter, the sky god of lightning, is idiosyncratically often associated with Odin, as well as with Thor, his son, who's the god of thunder and storms and lightning. And I just finished reading this amazing book by Frederick Holliday called The Dragon and the Disc. Frederick Holliday being a researcher on Loch Ness Monster. But at one point, he had a UFO experience and started researching that and found a lot of modern and archaeological and mythological links between the two. And he talks extensively about how Odin, Horus, Jupiter were all associated with an eye or some kind of circle disc flying in the sky. And UFOs themselves, he found out, are frequently associated with storms, with lightnings, and with the legends of the Thunderbird. So there you go, another connection. I don't know, again, how much this is conscious in the promotional material and also in the writing of the plot of the movie. Also, of course, I'm reminded of Nietzsche's line that when you stare into the abyss stares back at you. And I'm pretty sure that this expression is being used as well to describe the sense of responsiveness and this interactivity that people feel when they probe into these topics, and sometimes even to describe the encounter themselves, that it kind of like seems like the objects are playing with them, and if you say something or if you move or you react in a certain way, then they would react. It's almost like they're mirroring people. It's the profound uncanny and the deep unknown, but if you probe it and inquire into it, then it starts responding. And also at this point, after congressional hearings, whistleblower reports, the age of disclosure having just dropped, and an increasing amount of high-quality investigations, creative work, millions of eyes around the world are staring at the disclosure movement and the UFO conversation as a whole, which is extremely exciting. And in that sense, the eye becomes a very appropriate symbol for both the watchers and those being watched, which you could turn it upside down as well and saying the watchers, them, non-human intelligence, and those being watched, which a lot of people suspect is actually the case. And also, just this whole thing of the eyes, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of reports in databases like Newfork that include specific reference to crafts cited and described as being shaped like eyes or behaving like eyes. So like winking, blinking, or just staring, this kind of like eerie feeling of being stared at, and then just either descriptions of the shape of the eye as a disc or a specific particular feature of the craft, either below or above, resembling a pupil or an iris or just the eye as a whole. So it's super interesting. Also, let's not forget that Dan Farah dropped his documentary Age of Disclosure just a month ago, and it immediately became a world sensation. Is the #1 movie on Prime Video. And Dan Farah produced Ready Player One, which is a Spielberg movie. So I just wonder, they're clearly both very interested in the UFO phenomenon. They've clearly talked about it, and I just wonder how deep this communication between the two runs, and if there is any level of coordination between the two, or if they're just like both creatively and socially and politically moved by the urgency of the issue and the desire to get involved and do something about it. So I'm looking back at their early billboards that we got with the eyes and the birds, and now with the trailer and the updated posters that we have. And these eyes that we keep seeing over and over, they're not all seeing godly eyes. They're just a pair of very normal, very regular, almost innocent, actually, kind of like vulnerable eyes, especially in the first billboards. And they're just made to look otherworldly or even aliens by flipping the image upside down. So this is kind of perceptual inversion that is just recognized as a staging technique. And it was explored extensively by researchers like Jacques Vallée and Mac Tonnies as part of what they called a control mechanism. Now we know that the color of the eyes changes when people in the story establish some kind of connection either between each other or with these entities. And we see the black pupil expanding. And then when it comes back to normal, the color is different. So I'm pretty sure it goes from blue to brown, which is interesting, because blue and brown are the colors of the earth, is land and ocean. So that combined with the birds and the deer, and also that scene where they're in the forest and it kind of looks like the little girl, the deer, the birds are walking towards this fantastical looking house in the wood. It's just very fairy tale like. So that makes me feel like the whole plot, the whole symbology, and the whole world building behind the movie is actually quite earthly and terrestrial, as opposed to otherworldly and extraterrestrial. We didn't see any UFOs, we didn't see any alien beings in the trailer or in the promotional material, yet the classic saucer is still there. It's hidden in the shape of the flipped eye. Also, perhaps quite ironically, in the very phrase, all will be disclosed, we have the classic flying disc. Again, I might be reading too much into all of this, but Spielberg is a smart, clever guy, and he's been in the game for many, many decades. I just can't wait to see what he does with this movie in such a pivotal moment in the UFO conversation and in history in general. And this looks like a very different take on all these topics. And if I forgot anything, if you have noticed other things that I didn't, please reach out or write it in the comments. Also, my theory about the alien language is just an idea. And I tried, believe me, I tried working it out with AI or with different audio analysis software tools, but I'm not a linguist, I'm not a developer, so it's really hard for me to do that. I was able to isolate all the different vowels or phonemes of the language, it sounds to me like there is a word that we hear during the title reveal that kind of sounds like disc, actually, but it's not disc, of course, that comes back in the earlier speech when Emily Blunt's characters channels the alien language for the first time. So it almost sounds like part of the message includes the expression disclosure day or disclosure, but it could be that the first sentence that she channels in that language is actually saying all will be disclosed on this day, or everything will be disclosed, all the knowledge, all the information will be disclosed to you on this day if this and this conditions are met. So that's interesting. I definitely found some correlations. And so if you're a linguist or a AI developer or a software engineer and you want to collaborate to decipher this language, reach out and let's do it together. Thank you for watching this video. This is Edo, your host. You're welcome to drop a comment, a follow, a like, and share, and I'll see you on the Orbeterra experience.